working for 3 hours.
You're live.
I've had meetings before this. So this is the conference committee for the FY 2022 budget. And what we wanted to start off with today is to get an update from Steve Klein regarding the ARPA guidance that has just been released, because it appears that some of the proposed uses, particularly in the area of housing, have been dramatically curtailed because of the guidance that has been issued. So we thought it would be helpful to get sort of the best update right now, knowing it's still a lot more to be learned and clarified, as we move forwards. But this is right off the press. So I'm going to ask Steve if you would start out by briefing us on what you have learned, what would be permissible and what are going to be problematic as it relates to not only maybe what we've done, but certainly in the area of housing. That's been one of the biggest areas that the administration has proposed the use of ARPA, and it seems like there's some fairly significant limitations on the use of those funds. So thank you, Steve, for starting us off this morning.
Yeah, and this is Steve Klein from the Joint Fiscal Office. I see that Adam Gresham is on the line. He may have comments on what I say, so you might want to just give him a chance to respond a little bit. You point out this just came in like yesterday after midday, and there is we've had a preliminary look at it. There are some things we can tell you. There are a lot more we're going to learn over the next few days and weeks. But first of all, it's an interim final rule, which is a little bit more final than a it just does have some certainty to it. They are taking comments and there can be changes, but the couple examples with the renter assistance rules, it took about 2 or 3 months for changes. It could take much longer than that. So that I think this is what we'll be living with for the near future. And it goes to the point you raised that and the legislature has been operating under, which is that it makes a lot of sense not to commit up front because or at least do so within this guidance pretty clearly, because there's I don't think we can count on a lot of changes right away in this world. The other thing, the good news in this is it does overlap with the CRF guidance quite a bit, and it even says that generally that uses eligible under CRF are eligible under this money too. So a lot of what we did in CRF, like presumptive eligibility, being able to take money and use it to produce general fund and to offset general fund expenses and produce general fund that way, are going to be able to be done again. It's forward looking. It only affects spending after March 3rd. And that's going to be an issue. And they spend about 40 pages of the guidance on human service and healthcare needs. And it's very focused on coming out of the pandemic as opposed to the long-term aspect of that I think the administration began thinking about. Although there's still definitely room for that, and we can talk about that in a minute. Sure, they do reference considerable assistance for impacted populations, including underserved populations, and that's somewhat of a double-edged sword. We'll talk about that again. The other thing is there's a relatively firm end date, so I think things like loan funds and revolving funds are going to be problematical. I don't see any allowance for those, and this will be something we can ask more people to look into on a legal front, but I would not think we can include those at this point. Maybe in January somebody will find a way to see that, but I think that they do say the money has to be obligated and by the end of the date. And so if the money is to be used to fund things beyond that, I think that could be an issue. It's 150 pages. And as you said, probably the most problematical areas in the housing area. The reason it's problematical is that housing for the homeless is allowed. That'll be not as much of a problem, but affordable housing is limited to what's called qualified census tracts and people that live in qualified census tracts, of which Vermont has very few. It's low-income housing census tract must have 50% of households with income below 60% of an area median gross income and a poverty rate of 25% or more. So we have Vermont's poverty is sort of scattered throughout the state. We're not as concentrated as an urban area. And so this design is better suited for maybe a inner city and things like that. So it's finding those types of areas, and there's a map, I think, which I can send you a link to that shows where they are. There may be a little part of Rutland, a little part of Barre, but with that limitation, the use of ARPA for affordable housing is just not immediately possible. That may be an area where the advocates will be talking to the congressional delegation and everybody they can to try to get a change, but that could take a number of months. So at this point, I think that if you're going to move forward with affordable housing, you really are safer doing it with the general fund. And that's going to be a change from where the administration sort of began their approach. And it's actually a change from where the legislature is, because we have used a number of ARPA dollars also. The other thing is that they do still tie general infrastructure projects to the public health emergency. And so we're going to have to think that through in the broadband area, think it through in the clean water. I think most of those use activities are going to be found eligible, but we haven't had a chance to look at that yet. And there may be some areas where that is impacted also. I mean, I think some of the language that I mentioned earlier, where they say eligible services include addressing health disparities, social determinants of health, community health workers, public health navigators, remediation of lead paint, lead and hazards, and community violence intervention program reflect this sort of new focus on what we're seeing. And that's sort of new to the CRF world. It probably would have been allowed, but it's really called out here. So that would be my first sort of comment. I don't know if it's all right with you to give the commissioner a minute just to respond with it. Would that be
Sure.
all right?
I think the more information and perspectives, and I'm sure the commissioner's staff have been looking at this as well. So the more information we have at this point, I think the better it is for us. So,
And we might
Commissioner,
have a
if you want
question
to
first, I
add.
don't know.
Yeah, may I just ask Steve a question?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Sorry, Senator Sears.
Steve, can you clarify a little what you meant by the community violence reduction and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's just that there is language in here that talks about eligible services include community violence intervention programs. So I can see a lot of room for use of these funds for those types of activities. And that's, what's really different than what the debate we've been having with the administration is, and we've all been pushing for, which is using the money for long-term sustained change, which is really a goal that everybody shared. You see a lot of emphasis, probably the first 40 pages of the guidance reflect this focus on using the money to address the sort of pandemic and pandemic-related human service needs. So
in terms of for example, the high rate of opiate deaths. We're seeing.
You're actually beyond me if you ask any specifics. I would say that the issue really has to be pandemic related. Maybe Adam will have a perspective on that.
I think there's been a lot of discussion about the high rate of the increased rate of suicide or opiate overdose deaths is related to the pandemic and the inability to get treatment, etc. So that's what I was referring to.
Well, I think one of the areas is under supporting the public health response and services to address behavioral health needs exacerbate. Of course, Senator Leahy Senator Leahy Sanders announced quite a bit of money coming to the state. Mm-hmm. But under that is mental health treatment, substance misuse treatment, other behavioral health services, crisis intervention, hotlines, warm lines. That's what is under the section under supporting the public health response. So it seems like Senator Sears, that is more applicable or gives us more flexibility than the housing that gets tied into these census tract. I don't think that applies to the public health response, but maybe Commissioner Gresham can answer that as well. And then Senator Westman, you had a question?
I just so we had posted the link to the full piece and an 18-page summary around this. If there's some place, Steve, that like NCSL or any of the groups that have done a synthesizing of this.
Yeah,
There's a lot in here
Yeah,
about tribal response.
yeah, Senator
Is
Bray
there-
sent out the NCSL synthesis. It was 8 pages.
yeah, there's
Yeah,
also a
that would be
1-page or 2-page summary, which I could try to find for you.
Yeah, if I think that would be helpful to everybody on the conference committee.
Yeah. One or
You
two
mean you're
pages.
not reading all 151 pages?
Yes, I looked at it, and there's whole sections on tribal stuff that I didn't think was too applicable to us.
We'll see what we can send out, the Cliff Notes, because I think that's probably what is the most efficient way. Any other questions before we turn it over to the commissioner? Okay. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning. Adam Gresham, Commissioner of Finance and Management. Thanks for the audience. Rather than repeat what Steve said, the administration pulled out very similar comments at our initial run. I would add a couple more, though. One, it appeared to us that the language expands on CRF, which is kind of very time sensitive, specific to the pandemic today. It seems to include the ability to mitigate future pandemics. In other words, it's broad enough to envision that perhaps we'll have another pandemic down the road, and thus allows for projects that might transform, say, public spaces. For example, I think they even mentioned specifically airflow, that kind of thing. So that would imply that the ARPA money can be used to retrofit or transform public spaces, like HVAC systems, that kind of thing. That we did notice. There also was, it seems, pretty broad language regarding green infrastructure for climate change resilience and the like, which I think bodes well for some of the initiatives that both the governor and the legislature have called for. So that was encouraging. The final thing I would point out, which is intriguing anyway, and I'm afraid this is going to require a bit more reading than a casual breeze. The revenue calculations, recall that ARPA is available for revenue replacement, which CRF was not. And the calculation that they use is a bit Byzantine, but and will require more analysis. But I think it's interesting to note that it may allow us to use the ARPA money more flexibly, even for projects that may not be initially eligible, using revenue replacement. So, that is another takeaway. I would say, to Steve's point earlier, I mean, you really have to check your pride at the door when you dig into this. It's rather paternalistic when you read through it. You almost have the feeling they're kind of wagging their finger at you. But anyway, those are some additional comments that I would add.
Okay. Any other questions? So have you actually done any calculation on what that revenue replacement potential might be?
We haven't yet, but we will.
And we also looked at it. I think it's actually going to be quite limiting. There may be some revenue there. They do set an automatic assumed growth rate of a 4.1%, but it's by fund. And so we just haven't had a chance. It is a really complex calculation. We'll do that in the next few days.
In light of all that federal money, that slug that flowed to the state, that might influence that calculation, I would think. Okay, other questions? So it seems like what we can do in housing is quite constrained. That was one of the areas that there was a different perspective, and that the budget passed by the House had 40 million with up to 10 for land conservation. We had 40 million for housing and using general fund, and 12 million of ARPA. So I guess we'd even have to go back and look at the 12 million that is in the Senate budget and see how it aligns with the guidance?
Yeah, I would say that to the extent it's being used for homeless, it's probably less of a problem. I
Okay.
think if it's not being used for homeless, then we're gonna have to think about it.
So the 12 million probably then is, okay. And of course, the 41 we did, 36 we took out of that other pot of money. So Representative Hooper?
I would like to understand the ability to swap this money out a little bit more. Can you say anything on that? Give us some examples so I can get my head around it.
Well, and again, I'll let Adam jump in. This is something we just started thinking about. It's really so preliminary, but because it mirrors in some ways the CRF and it actually uses specific language that has the same presumption that if you're in a department that's working on CRF, on pandemic related work, you can use ARPA funds. We probably can do a lot of what we did in the CRF, which is, and I don't know which departments all, but a lot of the healthcare departments, the public safety issues like that, we may be able to use the ARPA funds and produce general funds that can give us capacity to meet some of the needs that we couldn't otherwise do. But I don't know if Adam, if you've looked at that more than I have.
No, that's kind of what I was getting at too. And I just think I'm hesitant to say anything definitive until we have a chance to trial through it. But that was exactly what I was saying.
Representative Hooper?
And I assume is it tied to the state of emergency? Do we have to be under one for it to be eligible, or and so it's prospective as well? It can and we can reach back to the date of enactment for this. Okay. So
it's not tied to the state of emergency then, because it's out into the future?
I haven't seen that tie yet, but I really haven't, to be honest with you. I don't
cross it either.
What?
We didn't come across it either, but like I said, there's a lot of, as you'll see, there's a lot of verbiage on that. They're kind of prescriptive in that regard. So it's going to require some study.
Yeah. So, Senator Kitchell, our huge dilemma is the House built the budget in a way, and you built it, the Senate built it in a way, both of us making assumptions about how ARPA money could be used. And now we have a new set of assumptions that we're going to need to contemplate and figure out how to plug into this. So this strange world of budgeting that we keep saying isn't the same as it used to be, just got different again. And I'm a little at a loss for how we have a conference committee when we're bringing a third set of information into this, but we'll sort that out. But that's, I think
I agree that just adds another, what is the line? It's curiouser and more curiouser or something like that. And I think the first step would be for our joint fiscal staff to look at what we have for budgeted ARPA and identify where we might have to make some decisions. If we still want to fund it, then do we have to look at a different funding structure, and how we can generate general fund similar as we did with the CRF. So I'm thinking that probably our joint fiscal staff and conversations with the administration, we can identify where we're using ARPA, where it might be a problem. Frankly, the Senate's version of the ARPA funding for housing has been a topic of discussion, and one I wanted to talk about more because there was the administration had proposed 90 million, which became sort of everybody was looking at that 90 million. Well, it looks like that's not the landscape has changed dramatically on that. And I was thinking, based on conversations I've had with folks at VHCB and the proposals coming in to date, that in fact we would need to look at more ARPA to support sort of those housing proposals. It seems like right now, it's been, the fact that we have general fund in there is is a good thing. And our capacity to add more ARPA, whether it be 40 or 50 million on top of that, which was something I wanted to have this committee talk about, now isn't really going to be the topic of conversation unless we figure out something else in terms of swapping out and creation of general funds. So it is certainly changing our discussion. You're absolutely right, Representative Hooper. And I think as a first step, it would be helpful if joint fiscal, working with the administration, at least could look at what we have in the budget in the Senate, and then what we're talking about in conference to make sure that it seems to be a permissible use. One of the things that I did note, there's quite a bit, and I know that the administration had been very much looking at tangible infrastructure, but it looks like a lot of the guidance on the use of funding gets into the public health response. It also gets into workers, it gets into training, it gets into the areas that, you know, we had in both our discussions had felt we wanted to make some investments, and that seems to be very much a part of the economic impacts of the emergency in terms of assistance to workers and families. There's more there about rebuilding the public sector and so forth. So I guess we are going to have our work cut out for us.
Yeah.
The other question I get, and in terms of what we think we could swap, how we can generate general fund in areas that we really want to continue funding. Are there other questions of joint fiscal and Commissioner Gresham at this point? Does it change any of the some of the technical and some of the other areas, Representative Hooper, that I know that we had talked to you, we're going to perhaps propose some other areas that we could close out that don't necessarily get compromised or impacted by the conversation we've just had?
I don't think it changes those areas, and so shall we turn to that? And
if people don't have any more questions of Steve or Adam at this point, then that's what I would think. We could see if we could close out some of those areas, and then obviously we've got more work ahead of us.
Yeah, thank you. And it feels like we will continue scrubbing the budget and understanding it, but we also now need to understand how we can do this work. And so we may need to we'll have to figure out how to manage closing the budget and getting out of here on time. But so toward that,
I would say, that's one of the non-negotiables, getting out of here on time.
Thank you. I am deeply grateful for that. And I kind of liked the idea of this Friday as being our goal, but next Friday is, or somewhere in between is just as good. So coming back to the budget and kind of starting at the beginning, what we tried to do was to find areas that were either technical adjustments or ones that we've put our brains around enough that we're ready to go with. So as you know, we've learned that there is additional money, that our debt service was not as costly as we thought it would be. And so it's been reduced by on the order of about $8 million. And you worked that into the budget on B100 and B1000 and B1001, because it created about $8,000. As you know, when we
8 million, maybe
million zeros, commas, $8 million.
Uh-huh.
As you know, when we were working on the budget, we were very concerned about having ongoing general fund dollars that we could use to fund ongoing general fund obligations, and came up with a construct to use the receipts going into the Clean Water Fund for a period of time. You backed it down a little bit, created a gentler slope out of the use of that money. With the 8 million that is made available by the reduction of the debt service, we believe that we can just do away with that whole construct. So erase everything that we had proposed with regard to using the Clean Water Fund to generate additional money. And so we accept your B1000, B1001, and on G701, where you backed us out, we would just say we just need to erase that and eliminate that construct entirely.
Well, we were happy Lady Luck went our way, because it really eliminated the need to do what you had proposed. We did alter it quite a bit. We reduced the general fund redirection to 22 million. I think you were over 60. So we obviously had reservations about, it was not a preference to go there. I suspect it wasn't your preference either, but knowing what the budgetary pressures were and the information you were getting relative to what the revenues would be out into the future, it seemed like it was a structure to deal with those anticipated revenues, but still do it within the parameters of our official forecast. So I think we're in agreement that we're fortunate that that estimate turned out to be too high, and that eliminated the need to do anything to change that percentage of general fund from the rooms and meals going into the Clean Water Fund. And so we are happy that happened, and we would agree that the language that we came up with is no longer necessary, and concur with removing it.
Okay, great, thank you. And now, so that's a significant piece. So thank you very much for that. And then on to some more technical or smaller. B108, you proposed a human resources classification study. We had known about it, taken a little bit of testimony. Our House Gov Ops Committee hadn't had time to really look at it. I know you've had a wee bit more time with it. We subsequently took some additional testimony from the Department of Human Resources, certainly understand the need to replace a 40-year-old Willis classification system that is entirely too complex. My personal hesitation was just this vastly important piece of work needs to, be thoughtfully done. And it's not a concern about human resources not doing it thoughtfully, but that we need to make sure that the people who are affected by it are also engaged. And we would accept the addition of the funding for the classification system, but would suggest that we propose that we ask the Department of Human Resources to engage the stakeholders, those being the House and Senate Gov Ops Committee and the state employees, in just their evaluation and their process for this system. They intend to do that. When you look at the slides that they presented on this, they say stakeholder engagement, and we would just specifically like to call out the legislature, since we pay the bill, and the state employees, since they are the ones who are affected by the work, the outcomes of it, deeply affected by it.
And well, I feel a bit elderly here because I was in state government when Willis came in. And so I I know how antiquated it is and how complicated it is. And it's something that we have advocated for quite a while. So do you have some recommended language that would do it? Basically is language that would mirror what the plan would be anyway. Obviously, GovOps would be the committee of jurisdiction. They have taken testimony, at least on our Senate side. They strongly support the continuation of this work. And I believe probably it would be a subject to contract negotiation anyway. I don't know.
I'm not sure about that, and that is my concern. So it shouldn't be something that is developed exclusively by the administration, and there should be some conversation with us. So
Well, if you have some language to propose.
We just want to include and engage legislative and state employees in the process. But so we can write that down and offer it to you. That was our thought.
All right, and you took testimony from the department?
Yes.
You said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
it needs to get done. No doubt about it. We just want to make sure the right people are at the table.
okay. And what you're basically want for language is what the slides that you had in the presentation outlined?
Again, just saying that the Department of Human Resources will, as part of their process, engage the State Employees Association and our, the relevant bodies, which I assume to be GovOps on both sides.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not suggesting that they have controlling or veto or anything like that, but that they have an ability to comment on the process.
Okay.
So we'll offer you, we'll write that down and offer it to you.
All right, that sounds good.
On that.
Obviously, we're happy that you're agreeing with the restoration of the money. I know some of it was just a matter of time and getting feedback from your committee. But I think I think we're all in agreement that we have an old system. Willis is out of date. Isn't supported anymore, and it needs to be modernized. So we will await the language on that, and happy that there's agreement on funding the work to replace our system. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I must say, Senator Kitchell, I join you in memory of when that was created. I remember who was called the Department of Personnel at that point, and who the commissioner was when Willis was instituted.
I don't know, may have been Scott.
No, it was Jay Wisner.
Oh, it was Jay. Okay.
Yeah. So the next ones that we have are, we agree to the B321 and 325, which are what the first is the a technical amendment to move $20 into B325 for the micro business technical assistance program. So we're agreeing to the micro business technical assistance program. We are
325.
325
Okay.
and 321 was just moving a bit of money got stranded and it needed to be moved. So
the DCF general assistance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So B321 and B325, we agree to your position.
Okay.
On B700, this is the funding of the Connecticut River Watershed Group. And Senator Kitchell, thank you very much for doing the research on this and helping us to understand it. Frankly, when we saw that we were calling out what I had presumed to be a one group among many to receive funding. It seemed a little inappropriate, but thanks to your research and understanding that, in fact, statute calls for them to specifically be funded, then we should do what our predecessors have said we should do, or we should change the statute. We're not changing
Well,
it.
I claim no responsibility or compliments for doing that. It's because the Sunset Advisory Commission, a legislative group, has been looking at a lot of these creations and made the request back in November that it should be funded, because although I think, unless you knew the history, which I really didn't know, the argument that ANR had to say they can compete with grants just like everyone else, that led to the question that I raised. Well, are they somewhat unique? And we found out, yes, they're a statutory creation and a broader mission. So I think we all got a history lesson on that one.
Yeah.
So we'll close that out, but there was
Yes.
some request to
Yes.
move the appropriation to DEC.
You had placed it in the central office of ANR, and evidently it more appropriately goes into the Office of Water Programs at DEC. So we would agree to your suggestion with the understanding that it will be appropriated to DEC's Office of Water Programs. But
And I'm assuming Stephanie Ledge Council will make a note of it to move it. And we can close that out. So move to DEC and, okay,
that goes into section B711 then.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, the next one is C107, the DPS utility ratepayers arrearages. Boy, I haven't read this language, but what I have focused on is, I haven't read it recently, I certainly have read it, we accept your position. We have some substitute language. We wanted to attend to the potential needs of wastewater and water supply systems and assure that they were included in that. So we have some language that we would like to propose back that has been reviewed by the reviewed and accepted by the relevant committees, and I would defer to some others at JFO if they want to.
Yeah, shortly after we passed the budget, we heard from the city of Burlington wastewater that the way it was written precluded assistance for that, and that was never our intent for this gap. I wrote back and said that was not our intent, we would modify it. And so I guess we had Mike O'Grady do a version, and your House committee had Maria Royal do a version. So we were both working on a modification to the language to make sure that that benefit would be there. This is a thing that was identified after the budget left the House. And what's really hard here is that the other two programs that interface here are the renter assistance, which is that 200 million that we approved back in December, I guess, Mary, at joint fiscal, with 110 going out for rental. That included utility and fuel assistance. And but that just got set up, and it comes with an income test, the 80% area median income. And then of course there's the homeowner part of ARPA, which I don't think I don't know what the status is. I think that's still pending. So the utilities are talking about, very large arrearages, but some of it is hard to determine until some of these streams of assistance get out there. So I think we're still talking about the 15 million for now, knowing that it's pretty fluid. And so I don't care which version, whether we use Michael Grady's or whether we use Maria's. it's fine with me. The intent was to obviously cover this assistance as well. So do you have, which version do we have?
Well, it's
Mr.
both
Klein?
of their versions, actually. They both agreed. So the version that the representative, well, I should be, go ahead.
Yeah, so what you have now received in your in basket is the agreement between the two drafters.
Well, you know what? I think we should accept it and move on.
That one has been well worked over. Yeah.
Yeah, I was sorry that we had a duplicate request for drafting, but as long as we've got a consensus version, I think we will certainly close that section out. So
What was
we
the
will,
number again, please?
C-107. Okay.
And then we have a few more.
Oh,
We have
good.
A little more time. I'm gonna do, I think, one more, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Rep. Fagan because he's our education guy. And so the last one that I will offer is E127.1. I actually had thought we had grabbed this when we were doing the other legislative session pieces in the B section.
Oh, this is the Dan Smith replacement language.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Okay.
And he has been hugely valuable to us in our work on technology related issues. Really sorry that he's insisting on retiring. Don't get why people think they should, retire. Very strange. But we need to make sure that we have those resources. And so we agree to your position on E127.1.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and with that, let me turn it over to Rep. Fagan to give you some education pieces.
Thank you, Rep. Hooper. And I even remembered to unmute myself this time. So we're going to turn now to flexible pathways, and I don't want it's B504.1, B605.1, E504.1, and E605.1, and it's easier to talk about all of it in one piece. Your proposal makes a whole lot of sense. We want to thank you for it. It's cleaner, it's timelier. Right now, the funding goes to the Agency of Education and Appropriation, and then a couple months later, on average, it gets transferred finally over to VSAC so that it can then fund.
You don't need to thank me. Thank Tom Little, who said this is just a cumbersome process, and we think we could offer a more expeditious way of moving 41,000. So we thought that made sense, and you do too.
It does, and there's just one amendment that I would put forward. We want to make sure we don't run afoul of the Ed Fund, so I think we need to include the notwithstanding language reference 16 VSA 4025 sub B, and just add that to make sure that we do not run afoul of the Ed Fund. We haven't drafted it yet, but that's it.
All right, so at 605.1 is okay, and then the other one is 504.1.
Right, both the B and the E sections, both money and language sections, and then in the language section under E605.1, add a notwithstanding 16 VSA 4025B language, just to make sure we don't do something wrong with the Ed Fund.
You said E506?
E605.1.
Yeah, okay. All right, so you want to, that's okay, but you want to add
Insert the
notwithstanding.
Correct.
Okay. All right. All right.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Yep.
And then it's also, this is something I've been looking at for years, trying to clean this up. So this is a very good move. Thank you. So E600, this is technical, just of this act is all that was added in E600 UVM. So we agree to that.
Okay.
Minor language change. And even though it's not on the sheet, the same change was under Vermont State Colleges, E602. I work off the annotated language, and so I picked up on that. So we also agreed to the Vermont State College's statement of this act. change. So both highly technical.
But you said there's not,
On our
Is there a
tracking
section?
sheet, on our tracking sheet, it doesn't show.
all right, that's all I was trying to make sure I understood. All right.
Yeah.
But 600 is okay. All right.
600
And
is
the
okay.
corresponding change that's not on here is okay too.
Correct.
All right.
And then in E602.2, the Vermont State College oversight language, your definition of accessibility, a little more fleshed out than ours. So we are good with that under A2, 602.2 A2. Definition of accessibility is good. The under sub B, the expanded verbiage, all the way through section 4D we agree to. That's all fine. It says globally is a word that was inserted. So it all makes sense, and that's great. Under 4E and then sub 10, you deleted the reference to benchmark. And that's just the piece that we would like to talk about. We would like to, and I don't have it again drafted yet. I really wanted to get your thoughts first. But something along the lines of the Vermont State Colleges shall offer methods of comparison using readily available metrics in order to provide relevant information that helps the General Assembly conduct its oversight role. Something along those lines. And I'm in discussion, and the Vermont State Colleges said that they would accept something in the middle that wasn't quite as stern as we had offered and that you struck. And so this is what I'm proposing, and I really wanted to get your thoughts.
Well, we were responding to feedback from the state college system that said when you use benchmarks, that's a very complicated, very time consuming. I think it probably took on more understanding and a magnitude for them than it might have for when you put it in. So they had asked that we not put that heavy a burden on them. And that's the genesis for the change.
Okay.
And that was something that Senator Baru spent some time on. So if you want to give us the recommended language, we also did spend quite a bit of time on the accessibility and trying to get that right and how to frame it in a way that communicated what was the intent. So I'm glad that part was okay. If you want to send a draft of what you have that would we got rid of benchmark, but what you would want to offer as something that would, and I don't know, is this a result of discussion with Vermont State College folk?
It is, and what I'll do is I'll run it through them, and then I'll forward the whole thing with their response over to you. That way, you'll have their response, so that
Okay.
you know.
All right. Okay, that would be helpful because I know that change was made based on their request and their feedback and concern about what that benchmarking requirement would entail on their end.
No, overall, I just want to make a comment about the entire oversight language. This is great stuff. This is something that it is important for the General Assembly to do, and the fact that everyone has coalesced around the concept and embraced it is really important for the future of the Vermont State Colleges. So thank you from the House side to the Senate side. Appreciate it.
Well, I think, all of us are getting feedback in terms of the money that's going into that system. It is millions and millions of dollars. And there's got to be an ongoing ability to monitor the progress and the transformation to make people feel comfortable that that work is proceeding and we're getting to where we need to be in terms of sustainability. So I think this is really an important piece to go with a very substantial amount of financial support.
Yep.
Between last year's budget and this year's budget. It's not inconsequential.
It is absolutely not. It is absolutely not. And if we want them to continue on into the future, it's important that we continue to monitor, to assist, and to do our oversight job. So thank you. There was one other one that I picked up on. It's not on our I'm sorry, it's not on our sheet of things that we're looking at, but it was E605, very technical again. And I just wanted to I'll flip to it quickly here because I'm in the 600 section. It is to 605. This is again, no, whoops, went too far. 605. You inserted in B605 of this act and you change a subsection reference. That's all fine. It was just, again, I was picking it up when I could actually see the green in this. I'm color deficient and I was actually able to see the green. So that was good. And I picked up on this. It was not on our tracking sheet.
Oh, I love.
Sorry, but just
I love
going.
being able to.
Yeah, I know. Going through the whole section myself, though, I wanted to cover everything that I saw. And so 605 is just, that's very technical. It's readability. So that's fine. And because of, I was going to go into one ARPA piece, but perhaps we would be best served if we paused and we waited until we got more information.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We had really hoped that we would also be able to close out some of the VSAC, some more of the state college pieces, but they're all ARPA now. And in addition, our Commerce Committee is looking at portions of this as it relates to some of the workforce development and economic development work that we're doing. So we need to think about some of those pieces together. So we had all hoped that we would have, 10 or 15 more pieces to give to you, but that brings us to the end of our list at this moment.
Okay. So it's 9:51 and we have to go on the floor. The question becomes one of, should we meet this afternoon? Are you going to be meeting more, your committee this morning, Representative Hooper?
No, we're on the floor also at 10, and we are in committee, I think on S3. 3. So, and I know that certain members of this conference committee would like us to attend to that. So that's an hour that we have, but I'm just not sure where we are in terms of what we know about the new guidance, and perhaps we need to think about that a bit before we can move ahead.
Well, maybe we could sort of be on notice. I don't know, from a joint fiscal perspective, are there areas where, if you can identify some of the areas, we've talked about housing, but if you can identify any other areas where we are running into difficulties with ARPA as we're proposing its use, would anything be ready by, say, late, 2 this afternoon to get any further clarity? 3, I'm sorry, Mary, which is 3?
I was suggesting perhaps 3, but 3. I don't know what they're.
Yeah. Okay. You think we would have anything more to talk about at that point?
I think as it relates to ARPA, not really.
Okay.
And actually, I don't think I think what the legislature is working with is not that far from, there are definitely some areas we need to look at, the IT area, for example, but I think you're not that far from what we could move forward with, but I would recommend waiting, giving us a little time to look at things.
Yeah, I know that some of the ARPA spending that was not included in the administration's proposal ties into certainly the education, workforce development, those kinds of certificate. And those are clear, it seemed to be fairly clearly permissible and intended uses of this federal dollars. So that part didn't seem to be, but the IT probably is. And all right, so shall we?
Well, Senator Kitchell, do you want to tentatively say 3? And if we have nothing to do, we can say we have nothing to do. And
I think that's what I was going to suggest is let's keep it open at 3. And then if we have nothing more specific to move on, we'll just have to wait until tomorrow and see what we can. And so stay tuned, I guess. We will send out, we'll send out a Zoom link for 3. And then if we're going to cancel it, we'll have Teresa send out a cancellation. Senator Westman?
So the highlight summary, I'll run down through it by section, the ARPA and the general fund. Is joint fiscal just going to look through that and do a checklist and say, this is okay, that's not? You
Well,
know,
that's what I'm asking them to do, is to identify the areas where where we're appropriating money in the budget that seems to be questionable. And I think Steve's talked about the housing. Housing, we were using primarily general fund, so that isn't the issue. The 12 million seems to be fine for that emergency housing. So I think IT is the other, but that's what I'm hoping they'll do, exactly that, Rich.
yeah, because as I look down through there, take, for example, G600, which is the weatherization pieces. Before I go back to the chairs of the committee of jurisdiction, I'd like to be able to say, you know, that piece is taken care of.
Yeah, all right.
Do we tentatively plug in 9 a.m. each morning?
I think I think that would be a good idea, because I know you're trying to do your scheduling as well, Dick. So why don't we, I think that is a good idea to have some predictability. So plan on 9. We go on at 10, but that gives an hour, and then that can determine what we need to do for the afternoon.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we'll put that down, 9 o'clock. And we will, if we have nothing to meet on at 3, Teresa will send out a cancellation. Or Chrissy or whomever. And with that, I'm going to suggest then we adjourn for the morning and go to the floor at this point. So thanks, everyone. And we'll get back either at 3 or at 9 tomorrow morning.